Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Tonight, we're getting a bird's eye view of the cross-border pollution problem. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The Tijuana River is one of America's most endangered rivers because of pollution. That's according to the American Rivers 2024 report. KPBS reporter Melissa May brings us a new perspective of the area that faces many complex issues.
From the ground, this is the state of the Tijuana River Valley. This week, the nonprofit EcoFlight gave a group of advocates, nonprofit leaders, and government representatives a bird's-eye view of the area.
You get a glimpse of how precious the space is and how unique it is in terms of its character, the canyons, the hills, the mountains, and where water flows. And so you see how all these canyons are being cut and molded by water.
Ramon Chairez is with the nonprofit Un Mar de Colores. He hopes that the group gains a new perspective of the problems facing the watershed.
It is that we really have in front of us. How is it that we change our way of life, and how is it that we can impact what we're doing on the ground in a different way that values our river more and our watershed more?
Waylon Matson with Four Walls International says seeing Tijuana from a bird's eye view showed him the scale of development.
This is a great opportunity to, I think, contextualize the growth rates and the anthropologic pressures that we're putting on one of the most biodiverse, beautiful places in the world, and how we're all culpable and how we're all trying to find ways and to, get the word out and find pathways forward.
Margarita Diaz is with an environmental nonprofit in Tijuana. She says many housing developments in Tijuana do not have proper sewage management.
That's why we have so much spills, because they have running water, but they don't have sewage. So it's a lot of holes. And also here in our region or here in Tijuana, it's different levels. Like the permits is the municipality, the water is the state, but the outfalls is the federal. So one thing has to go to 3 levels of government.
Diaz says she tries to be optimistic about a solution for what she describes as a 30-year-old problem.
We haven't seen things that stay the same way for 30 years, so it's very frustrating.
Melissa May, KPBS News.
Local hospitals are reporting that border wall falls are up nearly 60% from last year. That's according to data from UC San Diego Health and Scripps Mercy. They are the only 2 hospitals in the area who treat these kinds of injuries. The 2 hospitals saw 629 patients who fell from the border wall last year. They've seen nearly 1,000 already this year. They told our media partner KGTV they're also seeing greater severity of the injuries.
There's a limited number of resources, not just the finances, but in terms of how many patients can I and my team take care of, how many beds exist in the system. And so if you overwhelm those resources, it diminishes the level of care that can be provided as a whole.
UCSD Health research shows cost of care cost taxpayers about $163,000 before the border wall grew. It jumped to $243,000 after. Grief, outrage, disbelief are uniting the families of 7 people killed in a Georgia ferry dock collapse over the weekend. A high-profile defense attorney is representing at least 3 of the families. Laura Aguirre brings us more as he and his clients are demanding justice and answers.
Attorney Ben Crump represents a number of family members of those killed Saturday on Sapelo Island, Georgia. The victims were among hundreds of people that day boarding ferries to return home after a cultural festival on the barrier island. On Tuesday, some tearfully recalled the terrifying moment a metal gangway collapsed.
I heard a crack.
Regina Brinson and her uncle were among about 20 people who were plunged into the water. She says he panicked and was pulling her under.
I had to take his fingers one by one and peel them over my shirt. And I floated back up to the top and I saw his face and I was like, oh my God, what did I do?
Her uncle and 6 others died, all between the ages of 73 and 93. As the local investigation goes on, some witnesses say overcrowding could be to blame.
They just told everybody to go. And that was too many people. We were elbow to elbow pushing.
In a statement, Georgia's Department of Natural Resources says the gangway was inspected last December and no concerns were found.
I'm sure anything that's man-made has some type of limit. I don't know what that is.
Finding that out is one of many answers Crump and his clients will pursue.
We want to make sure that the Cephalon 7 isn't forgotten, isn't swept under the rug.
I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
Tonight, we're looking at lows into the mid-50s. We are still talking about a few low clouds. Those low clouds, though, are going to expand as we head into the later half of the week. Meanwhile, temperatures still rising here across our inland areas. We'll tell you how warm we'll get through this week before we do start to see a slight dip when it comes to the mercury.
The presidential candidates are working to appeal to undecided voters, but polling shows the majority of voters have already decided who they will vote for. And with early voting underway, millions across the country have already cast their ballots. Julia Benbrook reports.
With just 2 weeks until Election Day, former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris tailored their appearances and messaging to a shrinking group of available voters.
We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in the history of our country.
I believe that when we think about who we are as the American people, there is more we have in common than what separates us.
Early voting is underway in most states, and as of Tuesday morning, nearly 16 million ballots had already been cast.
I think everyone realizes this is probably one of the most important elections they're going to have in years, and then when they get it done.
I wasn't even really thinking about voting early, except for the fact that my daughter's back from college for fall break, so I just figured I'd go with her.
While Democrats had a wide advantage over Republicans in pre-election voting 4 years ago, there's some evidence that the gap may not end up being quite so wide this year. Trump's campaign is making a last-minute push to advocate for early and mail-in voting, despite years of the former president falsely painting these methods as dangerous and fraudulent.
Trump has changed his tune for obvious reasons because he needs those votes and wants to get people out. And some people just can't get out on one particular day.
Polls continue to show there's no clear leader in the race for the White House. Reporting in Washington, I'm Julia Benbrook.
If the signs around your neighborhood are not enough to remind you it is an election year, but in order to participate, voters must be registered. The deadline for that has passed, but if you missed it, KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne has information on what to do.
Election Day is quickly approaching, and voters have less than 2 weeks to make their selections. But all voters need to be registered, and that deadline has now passed. Sean Brom with the San Diego Registrar of Voters explains what to do.
If you missed the voter registration deadline, it's not too late to participate in the presidential election. Stop by the registrar's office daily from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., or you can stop by at any one of the vote centers and register conditionally and vote a provisional ballot. So it's not too late if you missed the registration deadline.
The registrar's office is in Kearney Mesa, or you can find a voting center close to home on sdvote.com. Brom says the sooner the better to avoid delays.
If you wait till Election Day to vote in person, expect a long line. That's why in San Diego County, we do have 11 days of voting for people to cast their ballot early.
Brom says early votes make the first round of unofficial results on election night. Delaying registration and ballot drop-off could cause a delay in results.
So if you put your ballot in the mail, it can get processed sooner and be part of the first results released on election night, again, following the close of the vote centers at 8 p.m.
He says more voting centers will begin to open as Election Day approaches, giving more opportunities for any questions, late registrations, and ballot drop-offs. And if you think you may be registered but haven't received a ballot, you can check registration status online or by calling the number on your screen. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
And for more resources and information on all of the local measures on your ballot, you could check out the KPBS Voter Hub at kpbs.org.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump's efforts to reach out to Latino voters. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Safety concerns are prompting the city of Encinitas to relocate firefighters from the city's oldest fire station. KPBS North County reporter Alexander Wen looks into what that means for nearby residents.
Encinitas Fire Station 1 is old, even older than the city of Encinitas itself.
It was a county firefighting facility, and it has been in use ever since.
This building was built in the 1950s with unreinforced masonry, which means it is prone to collapse in an earthquake, and the recent swarms of earthquakes raised concerns about the safety of the building.
The conversation got started about the way this building was constructed, and we had a building inspector come do a report, and it became time to take action.
The building was deemed unsafe with structural deficiency. So earlier this month, Station 1 firefighters were moved to Station 3, about 1.5 miles away.
So there's going to be a response time effect to it.
Josh Gordon is Encinitas Fire Chief. He says Station 1 is the city's busiest station, and the department is looking to reduce response time as much as possible. Even with the move, response time is within the city's standard of 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Gordon says the typical response time is within 6 minutes.
We're still getting to our emergencies within that response time that we've adopted, but it is going to take a minute longer.
The department is looking into how the move affects response time in the downtown area. As for what to do with the building, Cran says a number of alternatives are being presented at next month's City Council meeting, including tearing it down for a new building. Alexander Wen, KPBS News.
Despite a lot of uncertainty looming over the oil markets, most U.S. drivers are seeing relief at the gas pumps right now. So what's pushing gas prices lower? Karen Kaifa has the details from Washington.
Gas prices have ticked lower in most places in recent weeks, even in an environment with a lot of uncertainty.
We should see a slight decrease in gasoline prices going forward in the next month or two, and then a period of pretty relatively stable gas prices as things project into the springtime.
AAA's price tracker said that as of Tuesday, the nationwide average for a gallon of regular gasoline is $3.16, down 4 cents from 1 month ago. And Gas Buddy said Monday its tracker saw the median U.S. gas price slip below the $3 per gallon mark for the first time since early 2024. Ezra Peterson, senior director at AutoAppWay.com, says it's the season for lower gas prices as demand decreases from the summer months and as pumps in some parts of the country switch over to a winter blend that makes it easier to start a car in cold weather.
What that does is because you're using less crude oil in the refining process, the gasoline price itself is actually less sensitive to that crude oil wholesale price.
Peterson says U.S. gasoline prices have become less dependent upon swings in the global oil markets in recent years as the nation's refining capacity has expanded and reserves have been stable. Crude oil prices close to $70 per barrel recently have also helped to keep those prices at the pump in check. In Washington, I'm Karen Kaifa.
Meanwhile, locally, gas prices have dropped for the 7th consecutive day. The average price of a gallon of regular gas in San Diego dropped 0.6 of a cent to $4.64. And according to AAA and Oil Price Information Service, that is a 4-cent drop over the course of 7 days. The decreases follow increases in 4 days. The average price is now 2 cents less than it was a month ago and almost 97 cents lower than a year ago. It is Teen Driver Safety Week, and motor vehicle crashes are a leading cause of death for U.S. teens ages 15 to 18. Mandy Gaither has tips on how parents can help keep teen drivers safe.
On the road, there can be a lot of distractions, and that can be dangerous, even deadly. In 2022, more than 2,500 people were killed in crashes involving young drivers ages 15 to 18.
There are a lot of options for parents who want to keep their teen drivers safe.
Dr. Manisha Agarwal with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta says teaching a teen to drive safely starts before they're even old enough to get a license. She says parents need to set an example for their child.
Don't text and drive. Always buckle your seatbelt. Make sure that when you're driving, you are paying attention to the road and you're not participating in risky activities like speeding or tailgating.
Once they're old enough to get behind the wheel, Agarwal says teens should practice as much as possible with parents next to them in the vehicle.
We also know that things like parent-teen driving contracts can make a huge difference in keeping teens safe.
That's a way for parents to set rules and expectations for a licensed teenage driver, including night driving restrictions, restricting passengers, prohibiting phones and devices while driving, and requiring seatbelt use at all times. And Agarwal says it's also important to abide state graduated driver licensing laws.
Follow that rule. We know that when teens drive late at night, when they're driving with more than one passenger, those are all things that increase their risk of getting in a crash.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
1 in 8 women will get breast cancer. It is the second most common cancer among women, and awareness has grown to where we now know why baseball players sometimes wear pink shoes. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge tells us about the hard choices women have to make and the story of one woman's journey.
Janelle Franca Correa has just recently returned to work at her Point Loma hair salon. Life was pretty normal until about a year ago when she got a mammogram at the age of 41. It was negative, but soon after it, she started feeling some pain in her breast.
I met my general doctor, my husband went with me, and she said, do not worry. Things like this happen. Pain is not associated with breast cancer. Like, it may be just a mass that's touching a nerve, and that's why you're having pain. And either way, we'll do a biopsy and see what it is.
She got the results of the biopsy from a phone call.
It was my kid's last day of school, so picked them up at school, took them to Denny's, and then I got the call back. And I answered it thinking it's nothing. You know, I'm just sitting there with my kids. And automatically, you know, my oldest was like, I could tell something's wrong. I was like, it's okay, I'm just on the phone with my doctor. So I immediately texted my husband and said, I can't call you because I don't want to say this out loud. But it came back cancerous. We're going to finish up here and I'll come home.
Every person's journey through cancer is different because lives are complex, and so is breast cancer. Daniel Hollern is a cancer biologist at Salk Institute. He said he devoted himself to the field of study after 2 of his heroes, his uncle and his grandpa, died from cancer. He says cancer is a very general term for many different diseases.
Within breast cancer, we have triple negative breast cancer, we have hormone receptor positive breast cancer, we have HER2 receptor positive breast cancer. Each of those have different sort of treatments that work. And so therefore, you know, every cancer patient kind of enters their journey from, you know, a unique place.
Hollern's research is focused on immunotherapy treatment, teaching the immune system to attack cancer cells in a robust way. T cells are his attackers, but when it comes to breast and some other cancers, the cell targets are hard to find. He's looking for ways to activate B cells, another part of the immune system alphabet, so they can direct T cells toward their cancerous targets. Will this therapy become the best way to treat breast cancer?
I think even though immunotherapy has struggled to work yet, that it's not a hopeless endeavor. I truly believe that this is the way to go because our cancer cells can develop resistance to drugs, but when you have your immune system locked on, there's nowhere for it to go.
Holland's research may hold promise for the future of breast cancer treatment, but immunotherapy wasn't an option for Janelle Franco Correa. So she made the tough choice of having a double mastectomy. Her doctors discovered a cancerous lymph node in the process, so she will begin radiation treatment next month. Correa, by the way, had no family history of breast cancer. Losing both breasts was hard. She says losing that part of her and having to wear baggy shirts has been very tough.
It's definitely been mentally, emotionally, a huge challenge. I haven't really gone to parties or anything. I'm just don't want to get dressed in that sort of way yet. But the mental and emotional side has been the hugest part. And I've talked to lots of women that feel the same way.
She is planning to have breast reconstructive surgery. Holland says an important lesson in Correa's experience is the fact that she went back for more diagnosis even though her mammogram was negative.
The intuition that she had to go back and have a second look is really important because, sometimes you can miss things and the person knows their own body, something doesn't feel right. And, in her case, going back and having that second look probably is what saved her life.
In her salon, Correa has set up a little display with a picture of her family and an invitation to enter a breast cancer fundraising raffle. A reminder that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The Susan G. Komen Foundation is active this month, fundraising and sponsoring events that bring attention to the cause. Leah Brune is executive director of Susan G. Komen San Diego. She says they want to bring their message and the therapies they underwrite to women of all ethnic backgrounds.
Latino women, it's the most diagnosed cancer in Latino women. And like I mentioned, the 40% more likely for Black women to die from this disease. So these are just really large disparities that we need to continue just putting a focus on.
One of the culminating events of Breast Cancer Awareness Month will be the Susan G. Komen More Than Pink Walk in Balboa Park. The celebratory walk takes place on Sunday, November 3rd. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Well, you may have noticed that the temperature has been rising here over the last few days. That's number one on our weather headlines list. Inland areas are going to continue to warm here through the middle of the week. Though as we head into the later half of the week, those early and late clouds that we've been experiencing there along the coast, they're going to expand. On top of that, next week, we're talking about cooler conditions and also gustier conditions as we are tracking an area of low pressure that's going to be impacting the west coast. Tonight, we're topping off or at least bottoming out here at 49 in Oceanside. San Diego, you're at 55. Ramona, 47. Borrego Springs, 57. And Mount Laguna, you're dropping down to a low of 47 here for tonight. Tomorrow, it's toasty here across Southern California. Warm further north and mild and dry further to the east. If we look at tomorrow's forecast, though, when it comes to the numbers, you'll note steadier along the coast in the mid to upper 70s. Further inland, we're hanging on to those 90s in Ramona, Borrego Springs, 97. In Mount Laguna, you're even going to be flirting with 70. These next 5 days along the coast, you're not going to see too many changes there when it comes to temperatures. We're actually going to be staying relatively steady there Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You'll have a few clouds in the sky, but that sunshine will prevail here even as we head into the weekend. Areas further inland, you'll note that temperatures, while they were warming here through the middle of the week, they will start to come down by Thursday, Friday, dropping not a lot, but probably a little noticeable. We're down to the low 80s there by Saturday. We'll have some sunshine staying into the low 80s on Sunday, and lows are going to be dropping down to the 40s and 50s this week. As for the mountains, highs, while you're flirting with 70 here on Wednesday, you're going to come back down to the mid 60s there comfortably Friday and Saturday, even heading into Sunday. And for the deserts, well, you'll note that that temperature does drop here into the weekend down to the low 90s with plenty of sunshine. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Bree Guy.
Well, the countdown to Halloween is now in the single digits, but you have to add a lot more zeros to get to how much money people plan to spend this year. Emily Schmidt breaks down the spending and where you might find last-minute savings.
This is the time of year where fall is big, like more than 2,500 pounds of pumpkin big. Yet this year, it's also big to downsize.
We see consumers willing to invest in these events, but also looking for ways to be smart with their budget.
The National Retail Federation's annual survey predicts that shoppers may spend around $104 per person, down $4.62 from 2023's record high. So overall spending might be lower, though still billions more than just a decade ago.
But it's certainly one that captures consumers' attention and focus and generates a lot of excitement around this time of year.
Retailers say nearly 72% of Americans plan to celebrate Halloween, spending the most on candy. An estimated 67% hand that out. Decorations, a fast-growing category, and costumes.
$5. And on Amazon, the same ones that I was looking at are $13.
The National Retail Federation says 12% of shoppers, especially younger consumers, look for costumes at thrift or secondhand stores. Of course, even before the spookiest Halloween screams fade, winter holidays begin. The NRF predicts retail sales growing around 2.5% to 3.5%.
That could put total retail sales for the last 2 months of this year at a record $989 billion.
That's 85 times the amount predicted for Halloween, suggesting the year's retail treats are still ahead. For Consumer Watch, I'm Emily Schmidt.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. California is not a swing state when it comes to the presidential race, but NPR's Morning Edition is discussing how control of the House of Representatives could run through the Golden State. And KPBS Midday Edition has a show celebrating Filipino American History Month. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.